The wine glass trembled in my hand, its ruby liquid catching the light from the chandeliers above like a warning I didn't heed. I stood in the heart of the Sterling penthouse, a glittering cage of New York's elite, where every smile was a transaction and every glance a judgment. My name is Mara, and tonight I was about to learn just how fragile my place in this world was. The air buzzed with the low hum of jazz, the clink of crystal, and the practiced laughter of people who owned everything except, it seemed, their souls. I adjusted the hem of my emerald dress, the one I'd spent hours choosing to blend into. Their world enforced a smile that felt like a mask I couldn't take off. Victor Sterling, my father-in-law, stood at the center of it all, his tailored suit as sharp as his tongue, his gray eyes scanning the room like a predator sizing up. Pray. It was his 60th birthday gala, a spectacle of wealth thrown in his Manhattan penthouse, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline like a trophy. The Sterlings weren't just rich. They were the kind of rich that rewrote rules, bent laws, and made people like me feel small. 5 years I'd been married to James, his son, and 5 years I'd been trying to carve out a space in their kingdom. But tonight, as I navigated the crowd, I felt their eyes slide over me, politicians, CEOs, socialites who whispered about the girl from nowhere behind their champagne flutes. I clutched the wine glass tighter, my knuckles whitening. I'd learned to make myself invisible in rooms like this, to nod at the right times, to laugh at jokes that weren't funny. But tonight, something felt off. The air was too thick, the smiles too sharp. James stood across the room, his broad shoulders squared beside his father, their resemblance uncanny tall, chiseled, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing the world would bend for them. He hadn't looked at me once since we arrived. That wasn't new, but it still stung. A quiet ache I'd learned to bury. I made small talk with a woman in a pearl necklace, her voice droning about summer homes in the Hamptons. My mind wandered to the years I'd spent swallowing the Sterling's jabs Victor's comments about my humble roots, his wife's pursed lips when I spoke, James's silence when I needed him to speak. I told myself tonight could be different. I'd be perfect. I'd belong. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't my world. I was a guest, tolerated but never truly welcomed. Dinner was served in the grand dining hall, a space so polished. It felt like a stage. The mahogany table stretched endlessly, set with gold-rimmed plates and candles flickering like they were mocking my nerves. I sat near the end, my heels tapping softly against the hardwood floor, trying to blend into the rhythm of their world. Victor held court at the head, his voice booming with stories of business triumphs, the guests hanging on his every word. I kept my head down, smiled when expected, and sipped my wine to steady my hands. Then it happened. I was crossing the room, carrying a glass of Cabernet to pass to a guest, when my heel caught the edge of a sleek Persian rug. Time slowed. The glass tipped, and a crimson arc splashed across Victor's pristine white shirt. The room froze. Not a clank, not a whisper. Just silence, heavy and suffocating, like the air before a storm. My heart pounded in my throat as I stammered, "I'm so sorry, Victor." His head turned slowly, his face twisting into something I'd never seen before, pure, unfiltered disgust. Before I could finish, his fist shot out, connecting with my cheek. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Pain exploded, sharp and blinding, followed by the warm trickle of blood in my mouth. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my face, tasting copper. The room spun, the chandeliers blurring into streaks of light. "You clumsy nobody." Victor's voice roared, filling every corner of the penthouse. "Clean this mess now." I stood there, frozen, my vision swimming. Blood dripped onto the polished hardwood, each drop a small rebellion against their perfect world. The room of 30 guests stared, some averted their eyes, some smirked, but no one moved. No one spoke. I turned to James, my husband, the man who promised to love me, to stand by me. He stood rooted beside his father, his face a mask of stone. Not a flicker of horror, not a step toward me. Just cold, unreadable eyes. "Apologize to my father," he said, his voice flat, like a judge delivering a verdict. "Or get out." The words hit harder than Victor's fist. Something inside me shattered, not from the pain in my cheek, but from the betrayal in James's voice. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of trying to fit into their world, and he chose his father over me without a second thought. I tasted blood again, felt it smear across my chin, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. I grabbed a velvet napkin from the table, wiped my mouth with deliberate care, and straightened my spine. I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I didn't apologize. I turned and walked out, my heels clicking against the hardwood, each step a declaration. I was done. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into another world. The New York night hit me like a slap when I stepped outside, the December wind slicing through my dress. My car was parked blocks away, the windshield already dusted with snow. I slid inside, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. For a moment, I just sat there, the engine off, my breath fogging the air. The city pulsed around me, honking taxis, flashing lights, lives moving forward while mine felt like it was unraveling. I could still feel the weight of their eyes, the sting of Victor's fist, the ice in James's voice. The drive to my Brooklyn apartment was a blur. Snowflakes battered the windshield, and the city's glow bled into a kaleidoscope of regret. My phone buzzed relentlessly in my purse, but I ignored it. When I finally stumbled through my door, kicking off my heels and dropping my coat on the floor, I felt the silence of my apartment like a weight. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, the small 2-bedroom with its creaky floors and mismatched furniture, but tonight it felt like a trap. I sank onto the couch, my dress still clinging to me, and checked my phone. 47 missed calls. James, Victor. Back and forth like a tag team determined to break me. I didn't open the text. I didn't listen to the voicemails. But one message caught my eye from Victor. "You'll regret this, Mara. Keep your mouth shut." My hands went cold. His words weren't just a warning, they were a promise, laced with the kind of power only men like Victor Sterling wielded. I thought of my mother, her voice soft but fierce, echoing from years ago. "Never let them dim your fire, Mara." She'd said it when I'd come home from school, my eyes red from kids who called me charity case because we couldn't afford the right clothes. She'd been gone for years, but her words were a lifeline tonight. I wasn't that girl anymore, but I could feel her stirring inside me, refusing to break. I walked to my bedroom, the floorboards creaking under my bare feet, and pulled a journal from the nightstand. It wasn't just a diary, it was a ledger. A record of every slight, every insult the Sterlings had thrown at me over 5 years. Victor's jokes about my upbringing, his wife's comments about my lack of refinement, James's silence when I needed him to speak. I'd started writing it down to keep myself sane, but now it felt like something else evidence. Proof that I wasn't imagining the cruelty, that I wasn't the problem. I flipped through the pages, my handwriting jagged at first, then steadier, as if I'd been sharpening a blade. Then a noise, a faint rustle outside my window. My heart skipped. I lived on the 3rd floor, but Brooklyn's fire escapes were an open invitation. I crept to the window, peering into the dark. Nothing but snow and shadows. Still, my pulse raced. Victor's text echoed in my mind. "You'll regret this." Had he already sent someone to watch me? I checked the locks, my fingers trembling, and shoved a chair under the doorknob for good measure. Sleep wasn't an option tonight. The next morning, the city woke up oblivious to my world falling apart. I poured stale coffee into a mug, the bitterness matching my mood, and opened my laptop. My inbox was a minefield: work emails, spam, and then buried among them, one from Victor's assistant. "Per Mr. Sterling, your silence is expected. Any escalation will result in consequences for you and your marriage." Not even Victor's name. Just a shadow delivered by someone paid to keep their hands clean. I read it 3 times, each word tightening the knot in my stomach. This wasn't just about the gala. It was about control, about keeping me in my place, about making sure I stayed invisible. I closed the laptop and paced the apartment, my bare feet cold against the floor. Another memory clawed its way up, uninvited. A dinner at Victor's favorite, Manhattan restaurant, the kind where the air smelled of money and the waiters moved like ghosts. James had slid a document across the table, his voice casual. Just some legal housekeeping, Mara, a prenup amendment. For everyone's protection. I'd stared at him, confused, while Victor watched, his smirk sharp enough to cut glass. Everyone, James had said, but he meant the Sterlings. Not me. I'd signed it, my hand shaking, desperate to keep. The peace to keep James. I'd thought compliance would buy me safety. All it did was give him a leash. Anger surged, hot and clean. I went to my desk, a cluttered mess of bills and half-burned candles, and pulled out the journal again. Beneath a stack of takeout menus was a flash drive, labeled Safeguard. A habit from my old life before. The Sterlings, when I'd learned to protect myself in small ways. I plugged it in, transferring photos of my journal pages, every documented insult, every moment I'd swallowed my pride. If Victor wanted silence, he'd picked the wrong woman. That's... When I heard a car idling too long outside my building, I peeked through the blinds, my heart hammering. A black SUV sat across the street, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. It didn't move. I grabbed my phone, my thumb hovering over 911, but what would I say? My father-in-law's rich, and I think he's watching me. I backed away, my breath shallow. The SUV pulled off, but the unease stayed, curling in my chest like smoke. I needed to move, to do something. I grabbed my coat and headed to the subway, my journal tucked in my bag. The platform was crowded, the air thick with exhaust and impatience. As I waited, a man in a gray hoodie lingered too close, his eyes hidden under the brim. My stomach twisted. When I stepped back, he stepped forward, his hand brushing my bag. I yanked it away, my voice sharp. Back off. He smirked and melted into the crowd, but my pulse didn't slow. Was he one of Victor's, or was I seeing threats everywhere? By the time I reached my destination, a diner in Brooklyn, neutral ground, I was a wreck. I texted James to meet no Victor, no excuses. He was already there, his tailored coat draped over the booth, his face drawn. Mara, he said, like it was a plea. I didn't sit. Why didn't you do anything? I asked, my voice. Low but steady. He hit me, James, in front of everyone. And you just stood there. He looked away, his jaw tight. It was an accident. Dad was drunk. You know how he gets. An accident? I snapped, louder than I meant. Heads turned. But I didn't care. He called me a nobody. That wasn't his fist, James. That was what he thinks of me. He sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. You're blowing this out of proportion. If you just apologize. If I just what? My voice cut through the diners. Let him humiliate me. Let you stand there while he does it? His eyes flickered with something guilt, maybe, but not enough. You don't get it, Mara. Dad controls everything. The business, my career, our future. If you push him, we lose it all. I laughed, a bitter sound that startled even me. We? You mean you, James? Your career, your money, your father's approval? I leaned closer, my voice ablade. Would you let him hit your sister and call it an accident? Why is it different from me? He rubbed his temples, his voice dropping. Because this isn't just about you. It's about keeping the peace. Keeping the peace? I echoed, the words tasting like ash. You mean keeping Victor happy? I stood straighter, my hands steady now. If staying married to you means bowing to him, I'd rather lose everything than lose myself. I walked out, the diner's bell jingling behind me, the winter air biting my face. But as I stepped onto the sidewalk, a man brushed past me, too close, his shoulder knocking mine. Watch yourself, he muttered, his voice low, deliberate. My heart lurched. I spun around, but he was already gone, swallowed by the crowd. Victor's reach was long, and I was starting to feel it everywhere. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, my hands shaking. The journal lay open on my desk, its pages a map of my survival. I did the night's events, the punch, James's, betrayal, the SUV, the man in the hoodie, the stranger's warning. Each word felt like a step towards something bigger, something I couldn't yet name. My phone buzzed again, another text from James. "Stop this, Mara, you're ruining us." I stared at it, my mother's voice echoing, "Silence buries you. Truth sets you free." I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't invisible. Anymore. And if Victor thought he could scare me into submission, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The Brooklyn air was sharp with the scent of snow and exhaust as I stepped out of the diner, James's words still burning in my ears. "If you push him, we lose it all." My breath fogged in the December chill, each exhale a reminder that I was still here, still standing, despite the weight of the Sterling family pressing down on me. My name is Mara, and I just walked away from my husband, from the life I'd spent 5 years trying to fit into. But as I hurried toward the subway, my heart pounded with more than just anger. The man who'd brushed past me outside the diner, his muttered warning, "Watch yourself," clung to me like damp cold. Victor Sterling's reach was long, and I was starting to feel it in every shadow that my apartment was only a few stops away, but the subway platform felt like a battlefield. The crowd pressed close, their faces blurred under hoods and scarves, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I clutched my bag tighter, the journal inside it, a ticking bomb of evidence. Every insult, every slight from Victor, now joined by the punch that had split my lip in my marriage. The train screeched into the station, and I boarded, scanning every passenger. A man in a gray hoodie sat across from me, his eyes hidden, his posture too still. Was he the same one from earlier? My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to look. A way to breathe. Paranoia was a trap, and I couldn't afford to fall into it. Back in my apartment, I bolted the door and checked the windows, my hands trembling as I drew the blinds. The chair I'd wedged under the doorknob last night was still there, a pathetic defense against whatever Victor might send my way. My phone buzzed on the counter 47 missed calls now, James and Victor relentless in their pursuit. I ignored them, but a new text caught my eye from an old friend, Sarah. "Be careful, Mara. Heard Victor's planning a smear campaign. He's telling people you're unstable." My stomach twisted. A smear campaign. Not just threats, not just Victor was trying to erase me, to paint me as the villain in his polished narrative. I sank onto the couch, my mother's voice echoing, "Silence buries you. Truth sets you free." She'd said it when I was a kid, when I'd come home with bruises from bullies who saw my thrift store clothes and decided I was less. She taught me to stand tall, to fight back with words, with proof. I pulled out my journal, its pages heavy with 5 years of Sterling cruelty, and added the latest. The diner, James's betrayal, Sarah's warning. Then I reached for the flash drive labeled Safeguard, hidden under a pile of receipts. I plugged it into my laptop, backing up every journal entry, every photo of Victor's venom. If he wanted a war, I'd be ready. But readiness didn't stop the fear. A loud thud outside my door made me jump, my heart slamming against my ribs. I crept to the peephole, half expecting to see the man in the hoodie. Nothing, just the empty hallway, a delivery box abandoned by a neighbor's door. But as I turned away, my eyes caught something in my living room, a faint red blink beneath the bookshelf. I froze. Dropping to my knees, I traced the light to a tiny device, no bigger than a coin, its lens glinting like an eye. A camera. Someone had been watching me inside my own home. My breath caught as I yanked it free, its wires dangling like a severed nerve. Victor. It had to be him. My hand shook as I smashed it under my heel. The crunch of plastic a small victory against the violation. I couldn't stay here. Grabbing my coat, journal, and flash drive, I left, the city's pulse swallowing. My footsteps. The streets were alive with holiday lights, but they felt mocking, their cheer a stark contrast to the dread curling in my chest. I headed for a coffee shop a few blocks away, a place where the hum of conversation might drown out my thoughts. But as I crossed the street, headlights flared, and a car roared toward me. Too fast, too close. I dove onto the sidewalk, my knees scraping concrete as the car swerved and sped off, its taillights vanishing into the night. My heart thundered. An accident or another warning? I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the stares of passers-by, and hurried into the coffee shop, my hands shaking as I ordered a black coffee I wouldn't drink. Sitting by the window, I opened my laptop, desperate for a lifeline. My fingers moved on instinct, typing Legal Aid Manhattan into the search bar. A community legal clinic popped up, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, open for walk-ins. It wasn't much, but it was something. I downed my coffee, scalding my throat, and headed out, the journal heavy in my bag. The clinic was a far cry from the Sterling penthouse faded posters on tenant rights, the smell of old carpet and ink. A woman's voice stopped me as I hesitated at the door. "Can I help you?" She was older, maybe in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a voice that carried the weight of someone who'd seen it all. Her name was Claire, a retired attorney who volunteered here, and when I sat across from her, the dam broke. I told her everything: the gala, Victor's fist, James's betrayal, the camera, the car. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. Claire listened, her face unreadable, her pen scratching notes. When I finished, she leaned back, her eyes meeting mine. "You're not crazy, Mara. You're caught in a machine designed to crush you. But I've seen men like Victor Sterling fall before." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me from the edge. Then she dropped a bomb. "I crossed paths with Victor years ago. Represented an employee he blacklisted for speaking out. We lost his lawyers, buried us, but I kept the files. He leaves a trail, Mara. Always has." My pulse quickened. "You still have them?" Claire nodded, a glint in her eye. "I don't." "Throw away ammunition." She promised to dig up the files, but warned me, "This fight won't be clean. Victor's scared, or he wouldn't be coming for you this hard." I left the clinic with her card in my pocket, her words echoing. Men. Like Victor fall. For the first time since the gala, I felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile, easily snuffed out by the city's shadows. That night, I stayed at a cheap motel, too paranoid to return to my apartment. The room smelled of mildew, the bed creaking under my weight, but it was safer than home. I opened my laptop, searching public records for anything on Victor. Hours passed, my eyes burning, until I found it. A property transfer. A luxury condo in Tribeca moved into a trust with no clear beneficiary, dated days before the gala. It reeked of money laundering, of Victor hiding assets. I photographed the screen, my hands steady now, and added it to my flash drive. This was more than evidence. It was a weapon, but the fight was far from over. As I left the motel the next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from James. "Stop this madness, Mara. You're destroying us." I laughed, a cold, hollow sound. A week ago, that would have gutted me. Now it fueled me. I headed to the library, a quiet haven where I could dig deeper. The smell of old books grounded me as I combed through business filings, charity reports, anything tied to the Sterlings. Another hit, a shell company linked to Victor, funneling funds offshore. I snapped more photos, my heart racing with the thrill of discovery. As I left the library, a man bumped into me, his hand grazing my bag. I yanked it back, my voice sharp. "Watch it." He smirked, his eyes cold, and muttered, "Careful, lady. You're playing a dangerous game." My blood ran cold. I hurried to the subway, checking over my shoulder, the weight of Victor's threats pressing harder. Back at the clinic, I showed Claire everything: the property transfer, the shell company, the man's warning. She spread the documents across her desk, her eyes gleaming. "This is enough to rattle him, Mara, but we need to hit where it hurts: his reputation." We crafted a plan, anonymous emails to investigative journalists, packed with evidence, timed for Victor's charity ball on New Year's Eve. It was his biggest stage, where he played the benevolent tycoon for New York's elite. We'd turn it into his downfall. But as I left Claire's office, A man in a heavy coat blocked my path, his voice low. "Drop it, Mara, or you won't walk away next time." My heart stopped. I pushed past him, my legs shaking, and ran until I reached a crowded street, blending into the holiday shoppers. Victor wasn't just watching, he was closing in. The days blurred, each one a tightrope walk between fear and defiance. My apartment was no longer safe. I found my journal pages scattered one night, the lock on my door scratched. The flash drive, thankfully, was still with me, hidden in my coat. I moved to another motel, paying in cash, my nerves frayed. But Claire's words kept me going. "You're getting to him." I clung to that, drafting the emails with her, each word a strike against Victor's empire. The ball was days away, and I could feel the storm building. On New Year's Eve, I stood before my motel mirror, slipping into a simple black dress, its sharp lines a quiet rebellion. I wasn't invited to the ball, but I'd go anyway. Not to beg, not to blend in to watch Victor's world crack. The ballroom was a spectacle, chandeliers glittering, the air thick with wealth. James spotted me first, his face pale. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, grabbing my arm. I pulled free, my voice steady, watching the show. Victor took the stage, his voice booming with false humility. Then, at 9:17 p.m., his phone lit up. Then another and another. Whispers spread as news broke. Real estate tycoon Victor Sterling under federal investigation for fraud. His face flushed crimson, his speech faltering. Federal agents entered, their presence calm but commanding, serving him a subpoena under the ballroom's glow. Cameras flashed, capturing his unraveling. I didn't stay to watch the end. I walked out, James's voice calling my name, but I didn't look back. In my motel room, I sat on the edge of the bed, the city's hum distant. I'd burned down Victor's world, but the cost was heavy. My marriage was ash, my safety uncertain. Yet, for the first time, I felt free. "My phone," buzzed Claire. Restraining order dropped. "Victor's empire is crumbling." I smiled, small but real. My mother's voice rang clear. "Truth sets you free." I'd faced the Sterling's machine and survived, but the war wasn't over. Victor was down, not out, and I knew he'd come for me again. But now I was ready to fight not just for myself, but for every woman who'd been silenced, every voice drowned out by power. The fire inside me wasn't dimmed. It was blazing.